This is Roundtable number 4 in our program in conjunction with our grant that we're working on, the Cayuga and Seneca Lakes Agriculture and Craft Beverage Memory Project. Today is May 10th, 2021. And I have a panel of wonderful women assembled here. The title of this program is Women in the Wine Industry. There are so many that we can choose from, but this particular group of women have really been pioneers in the industry. So I really wanted to talk to them and allow them to talk a little about themselves and the history and some of the transitions that they have seen in the industry. So I'll start with Tina Haslett at the very top here. And she is of Sawmill Creek Vineyards, 5587 State Route 414 in Hector, New York. Her family now is a seventh generation grape grower. So welcome. And we have from New Mexico zooming in, Mary Plain. Mary Plain and her husband, Robert, started the Plains Cayuga Vineyard, purchased property in 1964. And also we have Ann Raffetto, who was a grape grower or a winemaker, for Wagner's for many years. She was a very early pioneer winemaker in the area. So welcome. And I think that's everyone. All the Lucas women. They started Lucas Vineyards in the early 70s. Ruth Lucas, her daughter, Ruthie Crawford, and Stephanie Lucas Hawk. So all of them have very specific roles in the family vineyard. They're still a family-owned and operated vineyard located at 3863 County Road 150 in Interlaken. So welcome, everyone. Okay, so I'd like to start with Ruth Lucas. You were born and raised in the Bronx, and very curious, I think everyone would be, how did you transition into becoming a winemaker, grape grower? Could you tell us?
It was an adventure. It was really an adventure. We wanted to live in the country, and we only had enough money for a small farm. So we went to see the cooperative extension agent, and we said, we really like this farm in Interlaken, and what can we grow there? And he said, because he said it's a too small a farm anyway. So he said, growers are making $1 million with a few acres of grapes. So you could try that. So that kind of gave us the incentive, and not the $1 million, but that we could do something with this land. And just as we planted the grapes, and it was just a family thing, and we just put a lot of hard work and effort into the grape growing. And we would talk in the vineyard and say, wouldn't it be great if we could make our own wine? And then the Farm Winery Act was passed, which allowed us to make wine, have a tasting room, and be open for sales. And first tasting room was our kitchen. And I look back on that now and think, that'd be a good Dateline show, maybe. It was pretty, the kids were tremendous help, and they still are, my girls are.
So that was 1973, I think I read that you first started looking into buying a farm.
Yes, correct.
And
we looked around, the Cornell said not to go any part of the South and Interlaken because of frost and different things. So we looked Interlaken and North. And we just fell in love with the farm. It had a beautiful view of the lake, and it just was great.
And suddenly your two daughters and had to move from Long Island to Interlake, and that must have been an enormous transition as well for the whole family. And while
yes,
you're planting grapes, so when did you actually start your own vineyard and planting the grapes?
The year after we moved here, 1974, we planted 4.5 acres of Deshonic for Taylor Wine Company.
All right.
That was a pretty big undertaking. Not knowing a thing about My ex-husband worked on dairy farms when he was a teenager. He was also from the Bronx, and he would go to the country and work on dairy farms, and he loved it. And
Okay.
so we're here.
And you were selling grapes for a little while to some of the major commercial wineries in the area, and then suddenly in 1980, what happens?
Well, it was prior to 1980. The bottom fell out of the big wine industry, and our first year, our first harvest, we didn't really have many grapes because we had a spring frost. Actually, it was snowing on May 10th, so we lost a lot of grapes. But our second crop, we had 34 tons of grapes, and Taylor was paying $400 a ton. And one of the local growers picked the grapes, and I was on the harvester with him, and I was thinking, oh, this is money from heaven, just because everyone, most people know that growing grapes is a lot of work, and
Right.
but it's very rewarding.
Okay. And so I'll jump to Mary Plain. Can you tell us a little about Plains Cayuga Vineyard and how that began?
Well, it began as a place on the lake to moor a sailboat that had a big keel. We lived in Ithaca at the time and had been looking for a place on the lake for summer purposes, and also a place that would have deep enough water to accommodate this sailboat. Bob was very much interested in sailing. I never was particularly, but I went along for the ride. So we found an ad in local papers that indicated that there was 2,000 feet of lakefront with a new 3-bedroom house, and let's see what else. There was another feature I'm not remembering right now. And you were to get in touch with a gentleman who actually delivered bottle gas for the Getman Gas Company. Bob got in touch with this gentleman back in 1964, and I was in the hospital at that time, birthing the first of my 2 daughters. I was stepmother to a couple of other kids that their mother had died. But anyway, Bob came back very excited after he had seen the property. He wanted to know when I was getting out of here, because he wanted me to see it and he didn't want to let it slip through his fingers. So as soon as I did get out, we went up there, we took a look, it looked very exciting to us. And then we found out there was 200 acres of woods and open fields and so on that went along with this. So that kind of slowed us down a little bit, but not too much. So we made an offer and it was accepted. And to my recollection, we spent $52,000 to buy this property. And of course, the lakefront was pretty steep, but there was a road that went down to the lake, and there was a little bit of a dock and so on. So it suited us very nicely for the sailboat, accommodated our interests. And the farm property had been rented out to local farmers, and they were growing alfalfa and hay and red beans and oats and this kind of typical farm product, none of which interested us very much, but we went along for a couple of years that way. Meantime, Bob was teaching at Cornell, had many Cornell connections and friends in the ag department at Cornell. He also had joined a home winemakers group, and that was basically people in the chemistry department at Cornell, that when they knew that we had this farm that had a nice slope down to the lake, they said, oh my gosh, the thing for you guys to do is to plant some high quality wine grapes so we don't have to travel all the way to Northeast Pennsylvania in order to get good quality juice to make wine with. Well, that idea rattled around for a year or so. And finally, we went the same route the Lucases did. We arranged with, I think it was Pleasant Valley Wine Company, and had a handshake contract with them, planted our first crop in 1972, just in time for the big flood of 1972, which washed through the vineyard and washed out a lot of the new plantings and so on. So we at that point had to reorient the rows and add more tiling and this kind of thing. But we were so lucky to have the help and consultation of people from Geneva, Nelson Shawless, and the John Einset, who was experimenting at that time with Cayuga White variety, GW3 it was called. And they were most helpful to us in knowing what to plant and so on. We put in a bunch of test rows right from the beginning and realized that the GW3 was going to be very interesting from the growing point of view and also the winemaking point of view. So, well, I've gone on too long to tell you about all of this. But anyway, by 74, when we first had a little bit of production, there was indication that the big wine companies were not going to be as interested in buying crop as we had thought they were going to be. So we did emphasize sales of juice to home winemakers. And I recall that one year we sold 17 tons of grapes to home winemakers. They came from Canada and all over the Northeast to get the grapes that they wanted and so on. So by
Yeah, I think
go ahead.
I think I had read, Mary, that by 1976, instead of buying the 45 tons of grapes, they were only interested in about 15 tons. So that's happened to Ruth as well, correct? Suddenly the big drop from purchasing all of your grapes. And so, what do you do with all the grapes? And Tina, you had a similar situation in your family. You and your husband, Eric, are now seventh generation involved.
We're the sixth generation.
Six, rather, and his children are seventh. So I know there was a similar situation that you had. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, my father-in-law, Jim Hazlitt, was running the vineyard at the time with his brother Jerry. And yeah, when they lost all of their contracts, just like the Lucas family, it hit the whole area hard. And so thank God for the Farm Winery Act, right? So farmers could do something with their grapes.
Right.
That, it was a blessing. And at that time, Jim and Jerry had divided the farm, and Jerry Hazlitt is the one that started Hazlitt 1852 Vineyards Winery to use those grapes from the farm and put them in a bottle. And they've been riding that Red Cat rocket ship ever since. But
I think I had read in all my research that his great-great-grandfather actually started growing, was a farmer, settled first in Mecklenburg in 1823, and then purchased the property that you're currently on in 1852. So that's remarkable to be.
Yeah, so when the
200 years almost.
Yeah, when the contracts went away, Jim took that opportunity to start ripping out the native on that original farm, and he started planting vinifera in the 70s. One of the first ones to start planting Chardonnay and Riesling on this part of the side of the lake, other than north of us, at the Standing Stone property. And
Gold Steel, I think, had that.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a big time of transition on the farm. A lot of debt was built up in order to make that transition in hopes that it would turn around for the future.
Okay, and Anne Ruffetto, can you tell us a little about your background, your education? It's very remarkable.
Sure. I'm a native Californian and grew up in Southern California. And my big adventure to go away to college was to go up north to Northern California, where I went to UC Davis. And didn't know when I started Davis, had a great biology degree, and I thought that's what I wanted to do. But my first year there, Davis has a degree program for winemaking. And one of my fun classes to get away from all the sciences was to take the intro to winemaking. And so, boy, I was sold on that. It was the perfect blend of using a scientific background, but still having this artistic, there was room to play with the science to create something artistic. And so that was just like the perfect match for me. So I graduated from Davis in UC Davis in 1981. And the degree then was called Fermentation Science, my bachelor's. And then also wanting an adventure after having done that. And I'm thinking, this is kind of silly now. I was thinking, well, California is saturated with wineries and winemakers. Why not go off on an adventure? And we had read, there were publications in the East that, Eastern Grape Grower and Winery News. And I forget what Hudson Cattell's paper was, but I had heard about the Farm Winery Act and how that was changing things for the industry. And additionally, I have to admit, I have a husband, and he was looking for a good graduate school. And so the Finger Lakes were a good match for us as the next adventure spot. And so he went to Cornell, and I landed in the Finger Lakes. The spring before I graduated, I actually did a trip out and met with Mary Plain. Ruth, I didn't visit you because at that point you were just growing grapes, but they had the physical. I also met with Bill Wagner, and over Glenora, Jean Pierce was winemaker at the time. So had an idea of what was out here and made the leap and have been happy ever since. Smartest thing we ever did.
And so I'm just curious, how many women were in your graduating class in the field?
Well, there were actually three. And there were three out of 33. And there were three in the graduating class ahead of me. And it was pretty funny. They had, the girls ahead of us had gone out for interviews for jobs as they were getting close. And they came back absolutely livid because they were like, they asked us if we could lift a barrel. They wanted to know, they didn't think women were physically able to do the job. And so then we all decided as a group, well, we're going to go to the rec center and work out. We're going to, and this was really before, now women going to a gym, you don't even think about it. But that was sort of on the edge then when we started showing up at the campus rec center. We were kind of getting looks from the, the guys like, why are you taking so many weights off? And but that was our sort of, okay, we're not going to let them ask us that question and not be prepared. But I never did get asked that question, however, though.
So you began at Wagner's in '83, is that correct? And
well, actually, my first harvest was at Glenora in 1981, but I was just harvest help, making no decisions. And I think even that year I picked some grapes with Mary Plain, helped them. And then in 82, I was working at Herman Weimer's with his vine grafting operation. And then Bill hired me in 1983 to be co-winemakers with John Herbert. And we were a team until John retired a couple of years ago. So.
Until 2019, I think you were still working at Wagner's, I read.
Yes. I retired in
2019.
2019.
And Ruthie Lucas Crawford, can you tell us a little about yourself and your background, education, and what you do at the winery? You all have very distinct roles.
Sure. So at this point, we're feet on the street. I keep saying that because of COVID, which I'm usually the person that does all the compliance and the licensing and the taxes, a lot of that type of thing. But basically, I grew up in this business. When I was a kid, I was like 10 or 11 years old when we started planting vines and moved here to the country from downstate. So I've really been involved in pretty much every aspect of the business, from working in the vineyard, tying in the vineyard, pruning vines, knowing how much wood to leave on a vine, looking at buds, what's alive, what's dead. I mean, sure, it's all boring what I'm saying to the layman, but I'm sure you ladies know exactly what I'm talking about. To doing lab tests on alcohols and titration, all kinds of things, and winemaking. I helped assist my mom with winemaking for several years. But pretty much now at this stage of the game, I'm like interacting with the public and doing the paperwork and things like that, and that kind of thing. Not that I don't help ship out some wine and things, but I'm not on the bottling crew for many years. So I've had my hands pretty much in every aspect of Lucas Vineyards, and I wouldn't change a thing. It's been a real great adventure.
Okay, thank you. And Stephanie, would you like to talk about your background and what your specific role is? I know you had many roles. I've seen pictures of you planting vines in the 70s. So talk about what you do currently in the family-owned business.
Sure. My background is very similar to my sister's. I've done it all as well. We spent a little bit of time doing everything. We spent a lot of time in the vineyards when we were little. Little meaning, preteen, teenager, just even prepping the fields for planting, picking up rocks, and then planting the vines and fertilizing the vines and everything you do before you can finally put posts in. And, we cut our own posts. We would go as a family to Danby, New York, and cut locust posts. And so we really have done it all. But for my adult life, I pretty much have focused on sales, retail sales, and customer service, and events, and staffing. And the business has gone through so many changes. In the 80s, it was just such a surprise when somebody would stop and be interested. And then in the 90s, people were coming out of the woodwork. It was just crazy. And things have kind of calmed down again now. There's a lot of wineries in the area, so there's a lot of choices for people to go. But since the last few years, and with the pandemic hitting, Ruthie says it right when she says we're feet on the street. We're in the tasting room every day. It's open. We're just interacting more with our customers. We have a very, very loyal following, thank God. And they really keep us going. We usually do special events for them, and hopefully we can get back to that. But I'm pretty much a tasting room person. But with that also comes all the merchandise, buying the merchandise, and all the labeling, designing the labels. My sister and I work together with that, all of our packaging, all of our marketing, all that. It's all done right in-house here. So
And so,
kind of hard to sum it up. We do a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
and so, do you recall how many cases you produced the first year, Ruth? I know I was going to back up and ask you about your wine making experience and how that all started, because you had no prior experience. And
The first year we made 400 cases, and to us that was a lot. And we were very fortunate. We went to Ithaca to an advertising agency run by Howard Kogan. And we said, we really need to get people stopping at our kitchen. And he said, how much money do you want to spend? We said, we have about $500. So he put together a brochure for us, arranged a tasting at a very, very fancy restaurant. It's the Greystone Inn. He invited all the retailers, and they actually came. The retailers came. And they loved our wines, and we entered our wines in competitions. We won gold and silver medals our first year. And very exciting. So we said, we sold 400 cases like in 3 months. Let's make 2,500 cases next year. And and it didn't work. You know, we really struggled. And like Stephanie said, in the 80s, it was tough.
so how many cases do you produce currently?
About 15,000 cases.
Okay.
And yeah, so it's good. I'm very fortunate. My son-in-law, Jeff's husband, is a winemaker, and he's great. He's really great.
Great.
And
So,
very open to listening to different things we have, different plans.
you had no prior experience in winemaking. You didn't attend a college for winemaking specifically.
No, I went to the School of Hard Knocks, I guess. And Mary Plain was, I gotta give Mary a clap here. Mary was my mentor. She was just, any question I had, she'd just answer. And I just really admired Mary. And Cornell Cooperative Extension was a big help too. I bring all my little samples of wine up in canning jars and they taste and they give me, some suggestions and different things. But it was, we always felt it was in growing the grapes. If you do a good job, grow exceptional grapes, you can make a good product that people will enjoy. And that's been the case.
Tina, we didn't talk about I know you have a business background, which is very important. Can you tell us a little about your education and your prior experience prior to coming into the family business here?
Sure. I have a background in my degrees in bank management, and I had a 20-year banking career, being a bank manager for a small business bank in Las Vegas, Nevada, of all places. Helped them expand from 2 branches to 5 branches while I was there. And then we got bought out by a monster bank, and I moved back home to the Finger Lakes. And this was in this was in the late 90s when the banking industry was just really in a flux. And I wasn't sure that's what I wanted to continue to do. And I thought, what do I like besides money? I like wine. And so speaking of Glenora, I got a job at Glenora Wine Cellars, being their creative sales director. And the rest is history. During that time, I met my now husband, Eric. So that was, we were just talking about this weekend. It was 22 years ago on Saturday that we met. And I've had a lot of different jobs in the wine industry before I came on full time with the farm about 15 years ago. So
what are some of the roles that you have? There are multiple roles. I remember seeing.
Yeah, I helped Eric's cousin Phil open Atwater Estate Vineyard. I was the general manager and tasting room manager at the time for a while, and I left that job to become the director of the Finger Lakes Wine Festival for Watkins Glen International. And that was the job I left to come full time on Sawmill Creek Vineyards to be the financial manager.
Okay, well, question I have, I'm sure you all would have stories, but how many women, what was it like to go to, say, conventions or, say, situations in New York or large cities? What was the ratio of women to men generally in the industry in, say, the 80s and 90s?
I can say there weren't many women. Maybe like at a wine grape convention in Geneva, maybe there were 2 women and the rest were men. And it was very few women in the industry.
It's a lot more now. The gap is closed.
Yeah.
It's a lot more now. It's very encouraging to see how many women are involved in so many ways in the wine industry.
Big change.
Super.
So,
I'm sorry.
no, go ahead.
No, I received a lot of encouragement. Cornell Experimental Station, as I said before, I went up there and everybody was very helpful. They didn't treat me differently. Like, oh, here comes a woman. You know, what does she know about winemaking?
Yeah, and so what happened in 1976 when the Farm Winery Act came about? Did you think right away, oh, I'm going to open the winery myself someday, Ruth, or was it just?
Oh, we did. We talked about it even before the Farm Winery Act was passed, and kind of a dream we had that came true. We made a lot of great wines. We won, I think, over 1,000 medals over the years. And, yeah, we have a good following.
Mary Plain in New Mexico. You and Ruth were very involved in creating the Cuga Wine Trail. Could you want to talk a little about that, how that all started?
Yes, I'm very happy that the Cuga Wine Trail got going. My husband and I had traveled in France, and we had been told that be sure and stop at Monsieur so-and-so's place, and he had some very nice wine. So we stopped there. It was just a little farmhouse, and we were in his kitchen and tasted his wine and enjoyed it. And he said, well, now I think you should go to my neighbor's. My neighbor has some very nice wine also. So we went down the road a piece and came to the neighbors and sat in his kitchen and tasted his wine. And after we left Europe and came back, Bob and I were talking, and I said, you know, that was a nice experience that these people would suggest going to their competitor's place. And the thought occurred that we could do with a little bit more business than walk-in business than we had. And I thought, you know, nobody's going to come to the Finger Lakes to visit one winery, but maybe if there were several wineries, they would make a weekend of it from New York City, and we would have a lot more traffic. So we began thinking in those terms, and got out after consultation with the 5 wineries that were involved at that time, Americana and the Doolittles and the Lucas and the Knaps and our winery. We decided to put out a brochure and see if we could attract some people, and we did. And I think our dues for that first year to cover the expense of the brochure was perhaps $160 some. I'm not positive, but it was modest. And we occasionally would get together and sit around the kitchen table and generate more ideas of what could be done to attract more people. So that was the beginning. And
Do you recall what visitorship was like from, this is 1983, correct? Is that when you?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Well, at least at our winery, it was Prior to that, it was less than 1,000 visitors in the summer. And soon thereafter, it began to increase rapidly. I remember the figure 3,000 visitors in a summer a year or so later. So,
I think
so the brochure was helpful.
Does this look familiar? This is a
As a matter of fact, it does.
Better.
yeah, you're very early.
How fun.
Yeah, so it was this brochure that has been donated to the archives by Carol Doolittle. So that was really wonderful. I know she was very involved in so many aspects of the industry, the Farm Winery Act and Hugo Wine Trail as well. So, Anne, do you recall what it was like working for, Bill Wagner? Did he let you just kind of be experimental and free? I know he was one of the first. I know the Lucas family, Lucas Vineyards, was the first winery on Hugo Lake, correct? And
Yes, correct.
yes, and so Bill Wagner was the first on Seneca, on this side of Seneca Lake, rather the
Yeah.
eastern.
Bill had a big personality. And fortunately, I was working with John Herbert. So that was good to have two of us to sort of be a team to stand up to Bill. I do have to say, both Ruth and Mary have talked about the Deshonek plantings that they had, and Wagner's was big into Deshonek also. And the winemaker before us, Christopher Johnson, was also a Davis graduate, and he was an incredible experimenter with Deshonek. He could probably write a book, 101 Things to Do with Deshonek. He was trying everything. And so when I came into the winemaking team with John, in the cellar was, probably 15 to 20 different things he had done with Deshonek. So that was a great learning tool in which we took and further and decided which ones we thought worked or didn't. Wagner had many wines, and it was sort of, once you started a wine, it's very difficult to drop it. Now we could tweak it and, make slight changes every year to improve them and reflect the vintage. But if that wine had a following, they let you know they were not happy if you decided not to make it in a single year. So the winemaking changed at Wagner's when Bill's son John took over the vineyards, or was being more involved, and he was much more receptive to selling grapes and finding new people to purchase the grapes, rather than having Wagner Vineyards use all of the crop and try and produce wines from them. So when John took over, then we were able to sort of pick and choose the quantities and which wines a little bit more. But if Bill grew them, he thought they were the best grapes in the world, and he wanted to use them.
I forgot to ask Tina, how many tons of grapes? I know with these various seasonal impacts, I'll put it politely, that we've had, how many tons do you normally grow and sell to other wine makers?
Well, we obviously sell all of our fruit because we don't have a winery.
Right, you sell them to all of the wineries, rather.
Yeah. It's been a rough 3 years in a row. We had an amazing, I'm sure these ladies can all agree, 2017 was historic, tons wise. So back in 2017, we had 470 tons of grapes that came off our farm, which was a lot for us. Our average is probably around 300. The last 3 years, though, we've been below that number. It's also, we're at a transition where we're deciding, our vineyards are now so old. Because they were planted 40 years ago now, a lot of them, they're in decline. So we're at that stage where trying to figure out what plan to slowly remove and replant and regenerate. I'd love to hear some of the other ladies talk about their older vineyards and production levels. It's an interesting all of a sudden phase to be in this many years later.
Right, I know you've had some natural disasters. Is it 2019 in August, the flooding and water? Were you impacted by that?
Yeah, 2018 was
2018, August, right?
horrendous. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
So what happened?
The grapes couldn't take in all the water that was coming down, and they were popping off the stems from inside the bunches. And so the rot started inside. So there was nothing we could spray outside to manage the rot. They just kept rotting from the inside out. And it was, I don't even want to think about it. It's stuff of nightmares.
Yeah. So, Ruth, how many tons do you grow, and what do you consider really one of the natural threats, the greatest threat currently to the?
Well, we have 31 acres in grapes, and we probably pick 150 tons, but we make wine from all our grapes. And then we buy some grapes, some red grapes, and white varieties also. The weather is a big threat. You don't know what's going to happen. Like Tina said, the rain and the frost. I mean, it was. It was in the 80s. I know for a fact. And it was beautiful December. It was like 50 degrees, and then it went to minus, I remember 10 at night. And all the bugs were killed. It's like, what the heck, because the bugs were out pretty far. The Christmas massacre, that's what.
It's just like Mary Plain had Hurricane Agnes, which I remember hearing about, certainly in Ithaca growing up, and destroyed her vines that they had planted. So I think, it was 70 degrees, 2 weeks ago, and then it was 25 degrees at night. So you've certainly had a rough year, first with COVID. How has that impacted your business, and how has that, changed? Do you think that some of these changes are going to be long-term?
I think they are. I think the customer likes sitting, and they like the flights. We give them a little information about the winery. I don't think the customers want to hear, well, we moved here in 1973 and planted grapes. There's so many wineries, they just want to, enjoy, visit with their friends. They come in on their phone. Jeff took a picture of a group 6 people sitting at the table with their phones. They're buying wine, which is great. We can get, more attention as far as we give them a welcome wine, and then they do a flight. They pick 5 wines they'd like to try, 4 or 5 wines, and they like it. And our sales have been pretty good during the pandemic. Loyal customers.
So I will go around and ask each of you briefly the same question to wrap it up, because there's so many things that we can talk about. But so I'll start with Tina. What do you think is your greatest contribution to the industry as a woman? I'm sure there are many, but
I think my advocacy, getting involved with the New York Wine Industry Association, paying attention to what's happening in Albany, finding ways to help protect the future of our industry has been a big focus of mine. And I'm going to keep doing that. And I'd love to have all these ladies too involved if they ever want to come to Albany and help us once Albany opens back up for lobbying again. But yeah.
Okay, I know you're involved with the conservation and environmental issues. We're having a talk on the new threat, the spotted lanternfly. So that's the latest worry that vineyard owners have, unfortunately. So Anne Raffetto, what do you consider your greatest contribution? I know I didn't quote the New York Times article, the feature article about you in 1985.
I think just persevering, and just, you know, I hear the women involved more in the viticulture end and all of the, you know, challenges that they've had throughout the years, which is the toughest to me aspect of Finger Lakes wine industry. But then for the winemaker, we just get dealt with, you know, they hand off the grapes and we deal with whatever the vintage has provided, you know, is reflected in the vintage. But they've done their job and with their challenges, and then they hand it over to us. It's a great industry. You know, again, everything at Wagner's has been a team. And so I hate to, you know, stand here and, you know, be Wagner's. So as a team, is everybody just working together to try and do, you know, to produce wine that we're proud of and to help grow the industry. And I think that's what everybody in this roundtable will tell you too, that it's just trying to do your best.
Oh, thank you. And so Ruthie, would you like to answer the same question? What do you consider as your greatest contribution to the industry?
So I would say being part of the team at Lucas. My mom and my sister and I all have different personalities and points of view, and we complement each other. Clash heads a little bit sometimes, but usually we can come to something we're all happy with. But I mean, it's just, I would say being part of the growing industry from when it was a baby, a little baby infant, and going out in a raincoat, 18 years old, going out with a phone book and a map, and making new friends that fell in love with Finger Lakes wines, not just Lucas Vineyards. I'm talking about store owners. I'm talking about different conventions, going to Wyndham. They had a big wine thing, like just bringing these wines to the public and other entrepreneurs through retailers and restaurants and things. I just feel that it's onward and upward. We're still here. We're still working hard. And most days are great days. And we feel really fulfilled. And that's what I would say my contribution is, just keep on going, keep on smiling, keep on living that wine life. And no matter how bad your day is, you can always have a little glass of wine or two at night. I hear it's pretty good and pretty healthy.
All right, so Mom, Ruthie, or Ruth.
Perseverance, because when we first moved here and planted grapes, the rumor was they're never going to make it. They're from New York, they're never going to make it. And, you know, we persevered, and when we started the winery, the first 10 years, they were hard. You know, we couldn't sell all our wine that we made. And, you know, family was in the tasting room 7 days a week. And, yeah, it's just, I think it's the perseverance and just hanging in there. And I often think of when the younger wineries, when they started, the older wineries, when they started, if they didn't start, what would things be like now?
Right.
So I think it's perseverance, and I used to say there's light at the end of the tunnel.
Okay.
That was my motto. We'll get through this. There's light at the end of the tunnel. And sure enough, there was light at the end of the tunnel.
Stephanie, would you like to add to that?
Sure. Gosh, I think my biggest contribution would be coming up with different events and ways to make our customers feel comfortable and want to come to the region. Over the past 25 years, I've been very involved with the Cuba Lake Wine Trail. I followed in Mary and my mom's steps. I was president at one time. And all the events that we do came from somewhere. And they came from some of us sitting around a table and trying to come up with how are we going to do a fun Christmas event or a holiday or a herb event or a Mardi Gras event. So I feel I worked really hard with getting those started and growing them, and also individual winery events. We've been hosting events at Lucas for a long time with music and food and open to the public or just to our club. And I've just always had this vision that we need to give the people a reason to come. They'll come for the wine, but then you also want them to come for another experience so they remember you. And I would say that's probably my biggest contribution.
Okay. And your husband's a winemaker.
Yes.
So that's wonderful. And Mary Plain, same question. You had so many contributions. I don't know. It's easy, not that easy to pick just one.
Well, I really think that the most important thing that has happened in the Finger Lakes is the cooperation between the various wineries and the imagination that has been shown in terms of promotion. As Stephanie is just recalling, the events have been very popular and growing, and the cooperation is, I believe, still evident. So that would be what I would come up with.
Okay. So well, actually, I said that was the last question, but it's not. This is the last question. If you had to do it all over again, would you? Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes, of course.
It's a great area to make wine.
Thumbs up, everybody. Thumbs up.
The diversity of the grapes and just, and the vintages that are so variable. No, it's, yes.
So
Despite
despite all of
part of our region being recognized in the world as a world-leading producer of some of the best wines, I mean, just that alone tells me that, I mean, when I look at where we came from and French American hybrid native grapes, and then now we're like, boom, it's like we should be celebrating because we've worked really hard. And as Mary said, without cooperation, none of this could have happened. We'd still be sitting here and people would be saying, the Finger Lakes, what the heck is that? Wine? What, like coming into the tasting room going, what is this? Like, what are you going to do to me? That's what they used to do, like in the 80s. Like, what are you going to do to me? Like, what am I doing? And you're talking to them and you want them to try wine. And like, we're on a great path. I think we just need to keep going.
Yes.
Okay. So I think in a great future, I hope. So thank you. Is there anyone that would like to make a final comment or statement?
Well, I would like to say that I would sure do it again because it was fun. There was, as everybody says, there was a lot of hard work, but looking back on it, it was fun.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So
Well, Monica, thanks for putting this together.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I hope great success, and I hope that the rain stops here and you all have a wonderful season. So thank you so much for joining me. So we have Ruth Lucas, daughters Stephanie and Ruthie, Mary Plain, Tina Haslett, and Ann Raffetto. So thank you so much for your time and your contributions to the industry. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.